welcome to Hudson Valley Knits. I am Amy, your host, and this is episode 113, I think. I will validate that, but anyway, today is January 18th. I think it's Saturday. Yes, Saturday the 18th. I am podcasting to you from my home in St. Louis, Missouri. If you are new and you're wondering why it's called Hudson Valley Knits, that's where I lived up until a year ago. I lived in the Hudson Valley in New York, and now I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I have some new whips. I have one FO, and I have a little bit to chat with you about. So my last podcast was 2 weeks ago, so this is unusual. Usually I do it like once a month. But I had stuff I wanted to show you, so here I am. Let me start with the whips, okay? I have a shawl on the needles right now. Let me show you that. This is the Chivago shawl by Irish Schreier. She is the owner of Art Yarns, and that is what this shawl is made with, Art Yarns. It was a kit that I bought online. And here is the first half. So this shawl is knit in two halves and will be joined together by a 3-needle bind off. It's made with a combination of her merino cloud in a fingering weight. That's this one, it's held together. And it's like a multi, it's pinks and grays and blues. Kind of like a lavender, almost a lavender blue. And it's also made with merino cloud in the worsted weight and using white and that same multi with like the lavendery grayish blue, grays and pinks. And it's also made with 2 of her beaded silk yarns. One, they're both held together with a strand of the merino cloud fingering weight, and one's just pink and one is is like the multi with a strand of the gray silk, and it's got like beads and sequins on it. If you've never knit with her yarns before, they are costly, but I promise you it is worth it at least once if you can swing it, because they are truly are not your typical merinos. Like her merino, it must be a very, I don't know the details, I can't attest to this, but it must be a very specific breed of merino that gives the best quality wool, because it's the softest merino wool I've ever felt. And I have knit many shawls with her yarns, a couple, one I designed myself, and they are all beautiful and long lasting and just super, super soft. So here is the first half. It is on a Knit Picks cord waiting for the second half. And this is how much I have of the second half. So I love this shawl, but what I hate is when you have, I hate knitting projects where you have like stripes. And the reason for that is on the back, and maybe I can show you better with the half I finished. And this is going pretty quick too, by the way. I am guessing that the next time I podcast, this will be an FO. And it's in my winter gnome fat squirrel bag, because it's winter. So this is why I don't like knitting with a lot of strands, because look at this is the back of the shawl, the wrong side, if you will. Now I haven't trimmed it because I don't like to trim too much completely until I have blocked something, because things stretch out and it might come out. But there are so many loose ends that the whole edge here is just really thick and tight and not stretchy, because I've woven so many ends into it. And it's hard to make the call, at least for me. Do I carry them up for like 5 or 6 rows? Or do I keep snipping and rejoining, which to me is just more ends to weave in. And so while the right side looks beautiful, and trust me, it will look even more beautiful once I block it, the back side or the wrong side will not look beautiful. So if I'm wearing this as like a scarf or something, you know, sometimes the back shows. And I think, let me show you, I would be interested in anyone that has any tips or ideas about this, but on this shawl, these are ends from when I joined a certain yarn, but I've been carrying the yarns up the side now on this one, but even that you can kind of see, and even with that, it's still, there's a lot of stuff to weave in. So these are all from joining or ending a color, mostly joining in a color, because I have, unless I don't use that yarn again for like, let's say 6 or 7 repeats later, I'm leaving it on, because I just felt that I had to weave in so many ends on the side that it looks different on the front, on the side that I had to weave in all the ends. Does that make sense? I hope it still looks okay. This is why I avoid stripy things. I find if I carry the yarn up, it kind of, I might lose elasticity. And if I don't carry it and I'm weaving in all the time, then it's also losing elasticity. So it's a hard decision to make. But I've had this kit in my stash for I think 3 or 4 years at least. And every year I put it on my Make 9 and I never get to it. So this year I decided, when I was going through my stash to see what I would keep and sell, and I looked at this and I said, oh, I haven't, you know, I bought this for a project and I haven't knit it, and it's been in here for what, 4 or 5 years, and I should sell it because I'm not gonna make, and then I'm like, no, I really love this wrap. It's beautiful. Pink is my favorite color. My second favorite is gray. So these colors are just the colors I love. So I said, well, then this is gonna be my next shawl, and it is. It's my current shawl. I started it as soon as I finished my Hint of Autumn shawl. So that is my first whip. It will soon be in FO. My second whip to show you, which you will recognize, I think I showed you the sock on a sock blocker, or I took pictures, but I don't remember. But I have the sugar, let me see what they're called. They're by Danny George, or Little Bobbin Knits, and they're the iced sugar cookie socks. I have show notes. I haven't done that in a long time, but I decided to do it again because I notice when I edit my videos, I notice that sometimes I'm silent for like 30 seconds or more because I'm trying to find the name of something on my iPad or something or other, and I wanted more flow in my podcast. Right, so a sugar cookie is being knit with a hedgehog fibers. It's a luxurious sock. It's let's see, I have that label in here. It is her sock yarn, just plain sock yarn is what it's called, and it is 90% superwash merino and 10% nylon. But let me tell you, it feels like it's a cashmere blend. It's that soft. And it's knitting up beautifully. I started the heel flap on the second sock. Let me show you the first sock. So this sock, so you know how when I don't know if this is the way it is for you, but for me, when I knit the first sock, it's always like slower because I am getting used to the stitch pattern and picking it up and all that sort of thing, right? I might, when I start the first sock, I might at some point have to rip it out because it just, usually when I get to about here, I'll pull it up over my foot, my heel, to make sure it's gonna fit right? So this actually, on this pair, the first sock went really well. The second sock, I'm going along and I did the first round of this stitch pattern here, and that went fine. And then I was watching TV. I'm thinking, oh, I know this now. It's going so fast, blah, blah, blah. And I kept messing it up. I don't know how many times I had to rip it out and re-knit it, but I made so many mistakes. It took me forever just to get past this point here and get to the plain vanilla sock knitting, but I did do it. And now I know better, and we'll make sure that even if it is the second sock, I'm going to pay attention. So these socks are definitely going to be a favorite in my sock inventory. I really, really love the colors. I love the pattern. It's a nice simple sock with just enough interest to make it really unique. So kudos to you, Danny. Another great sock pattern, and it's my Christmas Eve cast on. And this too, I believe, will probably be done the next time I podcast. And I am going to show you shortly what I'll be casting on next, but for now, let me show you one more whip. This too is in a Fat Squirrel Winter Gnome bag because it's winter, and that's what I did. I cast on, so the other day, this was very weird, but the other day I was working from home and it was really cold out, even for me, who pretty much prefers cold weather. And I'm working from home and my hands were like ice cubes and I was freezing, and I started going through my stash looking for a pair of Fingerless Mitts, and I do have some, and they're mostly all made with fingering weight yarn, and they're not really that warm. And I have a pair that is just Angora, and I couldn't find those. I think they're in this downstairs coat closet, but I'm not sure. But I actually got this sudden urge to knit a pair of indoor fingerless mitts that would keep my hands warm, that I could still work, you know, use my keypad. So when I was done working, I went through my my pattern inventory, if you will, and I did make a pair a long time ago for my aunt, a pattern by Romy Hill called the Maya mitts, and they were a part of her 7 shawls, one of her 7 shawls, I believe from 2015, 7 small shawls. She does that every year. I don't know if she's still does it. I haven't done it in a while. But that pattern that I made for my aunt was with a Angora wool blend that I had gotten at Folk Knitting Live in New York City, which coincidentally is going on this weekend, and I have to say I am very jealous that I can't be there. But I'm trying to find it for you, but I can't find it. But anyway, I made them for my aunt and I loved them, and it came out so perfect. I loved the stitch pattern. I loved Romy's design and how it how the lines blended in perfectly with the thumb, and she had a beautiful lace pattern on the top of it. I had to find that for you so you can see what I'm saying. It's in my projects. I just gotta find it. So that was definitely something that I always thought that I would love to knit a pair for myself. So I was at actually Rhinebeck, and the same vendor that I got the Angora Merino blend from, here's my pair that I made for my aunt. They really are beautiful. And I love the stitch pattern. I think it's called Broken Garter Rib. So yes, I was saying I found the same vendor that I had gotten the fingering weight wool Angora Merino blend from at Vogue Knitting Live, but they did not have it in the, so it's hand spun. This is very special yarn. It's hand spun, and every skein is different. They do it in 50 grams skeins, and this one is 2 ounces and 140 yards. Oh, this is the old one actually. It's not this one. This one is 109 yards. So this is a little thicker than what I had left over from the, it's all washed out, from the pair I made my aunt. So I could not repeat that pattern, which was written for fingering weight. If I cast on that stitch count, the mitts would be twice as big. So I am not doing that pattern per se, but I am taking away a lot of what I learned from doing that pattern. So I am using the broken rib or garter rib stitch pattern, the same exact stitch pattern, which is a multiple of 3. So I had to knit this and re-knit this quite a few times to find a gauge I liked and figure out how many stitches I needed to cast on, but I'm finally there. And I ended up, so it's technically, this is like a, I would call it a DK weight. They call it a worsted weight, but I would say it's more like a DK. I am knitting it on size 1.5 needles, Chiago needles, so it's very tight. I did it when I was swatching, I did it in this, and I also did it in a 2.75. I did do a small swatch. I started in a 3mm, and it was way too loose. I wanted something really warm, so I wanted the gauge to be tight. So I went to 2.75, and even that was a little too loose for my taste. So I am knitting a DK yarn with a US 1.5 or a 2.5mm in this DK-ish or light worsted weight Angora Merino blend. It's 70 Merino, 30 Angora. And I did a tubular cast on, which I got from Romy Hill's pattern. And I am going to join the thumb and do the thumb decreases as per her instructions in the pattern, but I am not going to do any beads or any lace garnishments. And I'm also, if you remember, the sleeve part of it was kind of flared a little. I'm just going to increase, do the thumb, and I'm going to keep it just a tube. It's going to be very simple, but I will say in my pattern notes when I put it on Ravelry that it's inspired by that pattern, to give credit where credit is due. But it's a totally different gauge and a little bit of different shaping, but I would have never come up with this if it weren't for her pattern. And this is in my Sprite 966 bag. This is a bag that I won from Sprite 966 video YouTube channel. Helen picked my name, and I was the lucky winner of one of her bags. And I absolutely love this bag. I love the handles. It is so well made. It has a little pocket inside. It's just perfect for this. Perfect. You can even fit a shawl in here too. This is actually bigger than I need for Fingerless Mitts, but I'm still using it. So really pretty beads too. Anyway, that's my other whip. here's the fingerless mitts that I mostly use, by the way, just since they're in my basket. I wear these every day to work. They keep my hands warm. It's made with scraps of Malabrigo singles and a leftover, I think it's, I'm not sure what the white yarn is. I think it's leftover, it's not Malabrigo, it's could be Jameson. I'm really not sure, and they're actually a little dirty, but I love these, but they're just not quite, they weren't soft enough. I want something soft and very much for indoor, because it's snow pure white. I would never wear it like outside or driving or anything because they would get so dirty. But yeah, these are a great pattern. I forget the name of it. Let me see if I can pull that up quickly so I don't keep you waiting. Close, back. It's a really cool pattern. And they are called Pinwheel Mitts by Austen. She knits them in 2 colors, but I thought it was a great way to use some of my favorite color scrap yarns. I made a pair for my sister too, which I don't think I do, I have that in my project too. Here's a pair I made and gave to my sister for Christmas one year with scraps, yellows and oranges, because those are the colors she likes. And here's mine. Did I say what? I didn't say what yarn I used, so I can't tell you what that white yarn is. All right, so that is whips. Now let me see, future knits. I want to talk to you about future knits because I'm going to be done with the shawl and the socks soon, and I have a couple of projects I'm really excited to cast on. I'm also going to be done with, you notice there's no sweater. Usually I have a pair of socks, a shawl, and a sweater. Typically that's been my modus, my modus operandum for the past couple of years. I'm turning this around so you can see the sheep. I got this at Rhinebeck. She's a regular vendor there in one of the main buildings. I forget which building, usually the B building, the one with the books in it, the books and the fleeces. And I can't remember her name, but I had 2 of them and I broke the other mug recently. I was very devastated. Okay, so future knits. I have talked about this. I don't have much to show, but my future sweater pattern is going to be the May pullover. I will be knitting this with my daughter. It will reside in my Amy Beth / Fat Squirrel bag. This is leftover from the Knitting Pipeline retreat, so it doesn't have the Knitting Pipeline thing on it, but she had fabric left over. I skepped it up. That's where this pattern will live. Here is my gauge swatch. My daughter has not finished hers, so this is a very laid back, no rush project. I will be working on this as my daughter works on hers. To be totally honest, I probably would not knit this pattern other than for the fact that she is. This is her first sweater, and I just, she wanted me to help her virtually, so we've been, I want to call it FaceTiming, but through Zoom, we've been video conferencing and talking about gauge swatches. And so she had to actually order another couple of needles because the smallest needle she had, her gauge was still too loose, so she had to go down. I told her to go down 2 needle sizes, but she bought both sizes. But this is the pattern we'll be knitting together. It's top down. She bought nightshades at Rhinebeck that she'll be knitting hers with, and I am knitting mine with John Arbor's Stitch by Numbers. So this you might see move rather slowly, and I'm debating on whether or not I want to cast on another sweater to knit simultaneously. I'm still undecided there. I don't like to have a lot on the needles, and I'm thinking I already have my Alice Starmore jacket on the needles, and maybe when I'm not working on this, I can work on that. maybe. So that is still a future project I consider because I haven't really cast on. I was talking to my daughter too, and we might record some Zoom sessions as we knit on this together. And I might add them to the podcast, hoping maybe you might enjoy that. If not, you can always skip it, but I might do that. Next on the future knits. So when I finish with the Chicago shawl, with the Art Yarns shawl, I'm going to cast on a very recent Stephen West shawl called Cabled Bliss. Here's the front, black and white, so I apologize for that, but it's a gradient, or you can knit it in one color. It's with his recent, I think he calls it winter, I don't know, it's a new kind of set of patterns he's releasing that I bought the whole set. I think you can buy the patterns individually, but it is a lot cheaper to buy them together. But I can't wait to cast this on. Here's another good picture of the model wearing the shawl. And it calls for 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And here is another stash buster. I've had these 3 skeins of La Bien Aimée in my stash. I had bought them from Isolde's store to knit in Isolde shawl with, that I ended up never knitting the Isolde shawl. And I'm going to use these for Cabled Bliss. This is I am going on a vacation soon, and this is going to be really great for knitting on vacation. It's a cruise, so I'll be sitting by a pool when we're not on an island. We'll be sitting by a pool, and my daughter's coming too, so which will be loads of fun because she's gonna bring her sweater. But this will be something I work on vacation in the plane and otherwise. The next pair of socks I'm going to use the yarn that was I won from Sprite 966. This is Helen's hand-dyed yarn, and this is like the perfect combination of, she calls it purple, oh, plumple. Her color is plumple. It's like an orchid purple. It's mostly purple, but it's very pink purple. And pink, I love this color. It was like she handpicked it for me. So Helen, thank you again so much for this gift, for all the little trinkets and for the bag and for the yarn and for sending it to me across the pond. I can't tell you how much I just am thrilled about it. So let me show you what I want to knit with it. I'm torn between 2. So let me show you the socks that I think might be next. It will either be Cleave by Hunter Hammerson. I have this pattern, it's in the 100 Knits Interweaves Ultimate Pattern Collection book. I have that book. And here is a good picture of why I want to knit them, because it's such a unique and interesting construction. I don't know if you can tell from this picture, but I can't wait to knit this and try this really cool construction method. Yeah, but this is not vanilla potato chippy knitting, but I think that the Stephen West shawl will be the potato chippy knitting, and this will be something more interesting. So it's either that or this pair, Arising by Linda Dubeck, and it comes from the ebook Socks 2018 Making Stories. I bought this sock ebook a couple of years ago, and I love every pattern in it, and I want to knit every pattern in it, so this may also be the next pair. I just haven't decided yet. And it's not an easy decision, but both of these pairs of socks will eventually be knit. I just have to decide which one do I want to knit in this yarn. I'm leaning towards this. But I don't know. We'll see. All right, so that is Future Knits for Socks. What have I not shown you? So I have some FOs, right? Okay. I have my, finally, coinage. I hope I'm saying it right. This is the cardigan I've been working on by Kate Davies. Using her Donegal tweed. I bought it as a kit with my 10% discount because I joined one of her pattern clubs, which is always a cool thing. If you do her pattern clubs, that she typically does them towards the end of the year. You get like a free pattern every week, and then you get the physical book. I forget which one was the last one, but she also gives you, during that period of time, 10% discount in her store for the whole period of time. And you can make as many purchases as you want. This sweater was so much fun to knit. I really loved knitting it. The yarn, I love the yarn, but I didn't like knitting with it. This sweater, if you go like this and touch it, it's really soft. But when I wear it against bare skin, there's an itch. The other thing is, it's a very tightly twisted single ply, tweedy, and it's thick and thin. It's not super thick and thin, but it's not consistent. Like it's very nubby, and there are some parts that get really thin and some that get really thick, so there's very little stitch definition, which is fine because of the look you want. So I did the steek. I did extra short rows in the back to make the neck a little higher in the back, because I don't like a lot of sweaters, in my opinion, for what I like, don't raise the back enough. So I did a little extra neck shaping, and I don't remember if she even had any at all, but that's just something I always do. And there's a few designers that I love that they just especially don't do enough for me, that I always have to put in a lot of short rows. But anyway, so I did the steek. I did the button band. I did so much re-knitting on this sweater because I wanted it to be perfect. If you remember, I cut the bottom off and knit it longer because it was way too short. My row gauge was off, and I had enough that I could knit up one more small ball, and it gave me the perfect length. It really turned out fine. I'm going to stand up so you can see what I mean. So I think this falls at just the right spot. And I'll tell you another thing. Like, you know how they tell you if you are not sure what size sweater to knit, measure your favorite sweater that has the perfect amount of ease, and that's what you should knit. This would be the one I would knit. It has, for me, the perfect amount of ease. Let me do a couple of the buttons to show you what I mean. It just really, there's no pulling. It's loose, but not too loose. And I'm gonna explain why I'm not buttoning the bottom one, but it really was the perfect amount of ease that I really love. If I were to change one thing, I would just make the cuffs a little looser. she in the pattern has you knit the cuffs in a smaller size needle, which I did do, but I think I would have just knit them with the same size as the body. Just to leave a little more room to wear a garment underneath this, because it does feel itchy against my skin, and I am not sensitive to wool, typically. But this yarn does itch me inside. So I probably won't buy this yarn again, but it's only because I didn't like the single ply stuff. I like Jameson for color work, but it's really beautiful, and it's got it's not a complaint, it's a personal preference. So let me show you as well what I did on the inside. I sewed in this ribbon that I got from the Woolly Thistle when she had her sale, and it's by Katie Greenbean. I love her stuff. Here it is close up. And I got the London Knits podcast. Is that the name of it? She was showing a cardigan, and she showed how she sewed on the buttons by putting a junk button in the back, and it just kept it neater, and it really was the best idea ever. So there was that. Now the bands, when I blocked, they were so perfectly spaced, and I picked up just the right amount of stitches. I did a crochet reinforced steek and just left it there. But I do have to the top, I'm gonna have to sew that down or something, because it hangs open in the top, and this kind of shows, and it's kind of ugly. So I'm gonna fix that, especially on this side. You see this little thing? And you probably noticed it when I was wearing it. So I made some mistakes on this, and I'm gonna talk to you about that. So like I said, I picked up the perfect amount of stitches. I knit my button band really nice and evenly. I do that after I steek and block it, is when I do the button band. I did, what I do is I do a 1-row buttonhole. And at first I think I did it with 5 stitches, and then I knit a few more, and then I tried putting the button through, and I could tell it'd be way too loose. Normally I would just keep going and stitch the buttonhole up a little to tighten it, but this time because it was right there, I just redid it, and the buttonholes are perfect for the buttons. The buttons I got at Rhinebeck last year from these are vintage buttons. And here's one of the problems. These baked buttons are not resin, they're not plastic, they're easy bake buttons. I forget what they're called. They I sewed the button on, I went to button it. I swear I didn't hit it against anything. All I did was I was buttoning the sweater, and it literally crumbled apart. And that made me very sad, because I only have 5 buttons, and I love these buttons. And it's going to be a pain in the neck to get this off, because I sewed them on so well. That was the first thing that went wrong. Next is the ribbon. So let me talk to you. I think the ribbon in the back of the sweater, this is the first time I've done that, but a lot of people do this, and here's what I learned. When I watched the London Knits podcast, she showed how on the button side, she just did the ribbon in between the buttonholes, so that's what I did. And I hand sewed them on. I am not a sewer. I don't even own a sewing machine. I don't like to sew. But I sewed this on meticulously because I wanted it to look really nice. And you can see my stitches are really, or maybe you can't see because of the light, but they're really close together. And I made sure that this was laid out flat and not stretched out too much so that it wouldn't, be skewed. And that's this side. And then this side, of course, because the buttons are going on this side, I just used one piece of ribbon all the way down. I sewed the stitches very close, tried very hard to keep them spaced evenly and not too big. Here's the problem. There's no stretch here because there's no break in the ribbon. So the length of the front is only as big as this piece of ribbon. On this side, there is lots of give. And I don't know if I can do this on the camera to give you, probably better if I wear it. Let me put it back on again. You'll see what I mean. So even though these are the exact same number of stitches on both sides, I'm going to button it on the top, and you'll see, hold on, that this side is at least, if it weren't for my bust, actually filling it out, it would be even longer. On the table, it was even longer, and it scared the daylights out of me. So when I was sewing on the button, I tried to make them so that the puckering, if you will, would be evenly spread. That's why it looks like it's pulling. It's pucker because this side is so much longer than this side. And then finally the last one. Yeah, you can see this side is much longer than the other. Now, if I stand up straight and this thing, I'm never going to button the bottom button. Usually I'm just going to walk, if I do button, I'll probably just button the middle two across my bust. The top one I will rarely button because of my final and most tragic mistake that happened with this sweater. So I'm going to take this off again to show you. I don't like wearing it open because that looks ugly. However, buttoned, I think it looks uglier. And what I tried to do to make the buttonhole look prettier was take some of my leftover yarn. And originally I used the gray that the body is, and just go around and put like a border, if you will, around the buttonhole. Well, it looked terrible. It was way too thick and it was lumpy and inconsistent. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't work. I'm going to take it off. So I took a pair of my steeking scissors, and I tried to cut it off, and I snipped a live stitch. And that's when I cried. Luckily, it's not the end of the world because it's just the button band. Worst case scenario, so I have to take all these stitches out. It's just not the end of the world because I should probably do this over with one piece of ribbon and just cut and sew the ribbon. But I would have to take the button band down to the purple because the purple is what I accidentally snipped. So I would have to take it down to the button row. I would have to rip down to where I made the buttonholes, and then reknit like 3, 4, 2, 4, 5, 6 rows of the button band. That's not tragic. I have enough yarn to do it. But in the meantime, I kind of took the ends of the, and this is single ply too. It's not strong. That's the thing. If it were Jameson, I would hardly worry because first of all, I could felt it very easily. This is not the same. This reminds me, not quite as much, but it's like Brooklyn tweed. It just pulls apart really easily. Not quite as easily as Brooklyn tweed, but it does. So I tied it, and to keep the buttonhole from stretching out, if I did want to button it and possibly pulling that stitch out even more, I put more yarn around the buttonhole. Now the problem is this keeps the buttonhole from stretching, which will help keep that cut snip stitch from unraveling. until I'm ready to deal with it. But now you've got this big ugly buttonhole, and it makes the band bulge out. It just looks bad. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but that is something I can fix. But I spent a whole day just sewing. It took a whole day, a whole day to do all these ribbons and the buttons and everything. And I was so proud of myself because I was being so patient and meticulous, and it was all because I had to try that little embroider around the buttonhole thing that messed it all up. The length I could have dealt with because when I buttoned it up, it didn't really look as bad. You couldn't notice as much, but this buttonhole, that's a thing. So this is, ironically, definitely going to be a favorite sweater. I need more cardigans in my wardrobe. I have almost all pullovers except my Alice Starmore, which is a cardigan / jacket, but it's way too small for me. I still wear it because it was such a labor of love, but the sleeves are too short. The cardigan is too short because of my row gauge, and it just doesn't fit right. But that's okay. Now, I'm getting on 45 minutes, so what I'm going to talk about next, if you're not interested, you can go, is, it's not like a knit-along, but I'm doing a log cabin square swap. Here's my first log cabin square, which will be somebody else's square. So I'm going to talk about that, and if you're not interested in swapping squares, then I will see you, I think, in a couple of weeks. I think definitely probably before in the next 3 weeks or so. I should definitely have another podcast and have some more finished objects to show you. Thank you for stopping by, and if you're at Vogue Knitting Live this weekend, I hope you have the time of your life. It's always been one of my favorite events. I just really, you're gonna meet so many great people. So I'm really happy for all of you. And I'm really kind of jealous too, because I wish I were there. I miss living close to New York City. It was, and I never took it for granted. I always was very grateful that I lived so close to such a great city. So anyway, have a great time. And now I'm going to talk about the log cabin swap. So I talked about this on the last recording, and I asked if anyone would be interested. And 3 other people and myself are interested in doing this. And I noticed that Helen from Sprite 966, I just saw her post this morning on Instagram, her first square. So I wanted to go some of the details. This is what I'm thinking. The pattern is definitely going to be Learn to Knit a Log Cabin by Stacey Perry, and it's a free pattern. So that's the pattern we'll be using for the squares. I am using worsted weight yarn, so make sure you use worsted weight yarn. The size of the square is not terribly important. Try as much as you can to get the gauge in the pattern, but if it's a little tight or a little loose, don't worry too much, because when we knit this over a year ago for my friend Sandy, the whole knitting group got together and everybody knit a few squares, and we put it together and gifted it to Sandy, who was going through chemo. It's like a comfort gift. And even though all our gauges were slightly different, when we put it together, it was fine, because things would stretch out and it looked fine. So don't worry too much if someone else's square is a little smaller or bigger than yours. It'll all work out. So far there's 4 of us, 2 in the UK and 2 in the US. And here's what I was thinking we could do. We could either do, I'll swap with the person in the US, and the 2 in the UK can swap with each other. Or wouldn't it be really cool if all 4 of us make a square for all the other people that have signed up? So I would make 3 squares to give to the other ladies on this, and everybody else would make a square for the other 3 and mail it. So those are the 2 ways we could do it. I don't want to force anybody to do a lot of mailings that they maybe can't afford to or don't want to. Or maybe you just wanted to make 1 square, you really didn't want to make a bunch of squares, you just wanted to make a pillow. That's fine too. So I do have a Ravelry group. I don't talk about it because really it's been inactive for quite a long time. Nobody uses it, and comments usually end up here on YouTube. But if you would like to participate, the more the merrier. Please go to Hudson Valley Knits Ravelry group and reply to the thread, and I'll add your name to it. And yeah, let's do this. I think this could be so much fun, and it'll make everyone's blanket all that more special, right? So I will be aiming to do, I'm thinking this should be a year-long thing or a continuous thing, that if anybody's looking to swap a square, they can go on that thread and say, anyone want to swap? And we can just keep this thread open forever. But for the sake of this year, I'm looking to do a square a month at least, maybe more than 1 on some months. And the first ones I make will be going to all the ladies that signed up. Now, if they don't want to send me one back, that's fine, and they could do it just the way they want, but that's what I want to do. I am making sure that each square has at least 1 or 2 stripes of homespun, and this one does. This is homespun here, and this is homespun, and I think that's it. That's it with the homespun. So yes, each one of my squares that I send off will have at least 1 or 2 stripes of homespun, hand spun. So yeah, I would really love to get more people on with this. Each square will look different that I do because I have a big bag of worsted weight scraps, and I'll just be putting them together willy-nilly. And then I'll be doing a final round in black. We used for Sandy's blanket, we used, I forget, but we used a solid black. We could use like Knit Picks Wool of the Andy or anything like that. And it really looks beautiful. It kind of pulls everything together and makes it so it doesn't matter how different the squares are. They'll look beautiful together when you have a neutral color like black joining the squares together. So that's my pitch for this, and I brought it up again just in case you didn't watch the last podcast and you might be interested in joining us. I think it'd be really fun. So anyway, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you so much for listening. It was really great to kind of be getting back in the swing again, and it feels good because I'm finishing projects. I love finishing things. I typically will not have a lot on the needles because I just can't. I like this, I want to cast it on really bad. I can't wait to start knitting it, but I'm like, no, I have to finish my Heather shawl because then I just have stuff lying around. So yeah, I'm a finisher. All right, off to go knitting and get this podcast up. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.